Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into this special edition of the BF Writers Club right here on Buffalo Fanatics. Yes, that is right. I did say afternoon, not evening. I have a family function later tonight, so we're squeezing the show in this afternoon. Happy to have you along for the ride with us here. Once again, this is your host, Kevin Syracuse, alongside Zach Vaughn on Buffalo Fanatics. And Zach, it is July 9th. So first of all, happy Dick Duran Day. Second of all, do you know what it is the 12-year anniversary of?
I'm going to take a wild guess and say Dick Duran getting fired? No. Gav, you there?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure if this is my end or your end. I will take this time right now to apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that we experienced today, because I think this is a StreamYard issue from when we were streaming from. I saw some things on my end that said, if you're connected to the internet, this may be our issue, maybe not your issue. So either way, someone's got an issue. So just putting that out there right now. I apologize in advance. Zach, are we good? Because it looks like it's a little bit frozen here. We got a warm day here, so it's a little bit too warm to be frozen.
I'm good on my end. But technology, right?
Okay, this is a good day for the private chat, I guess, because... So yeah, Zach, July 9th, 2011. Do you know what that references to?
Is it football related?
It is not. It is based on a team in my background right now.
Well, if it's not the Bills, then I'm going to take it to the Yankees.
Yep. So 12 years ago today, Derek Jeter hit his 3,000th hit with a home run off of David Price. I saw that someone tagged me in a tweet today, and I was like, holy cow, 12 years ago. But I remember just like it was yesterday. I was in my backyard, and my friend AJ comes running over, and he's like, did you see it? And I was like, did he just do it? And he did it to the extreme. So Derek Jeter hit a home run for his 3,000th career hit off of David Price of the Tampa Bay Rays at the time.
Right. That was a really awesome game.
Say it again.
I said that was an awesome game.
Yes, it was. Now, as for the current Yankees, what are your thoughts? Because it's been up and down, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, weren't doing that good. I think they've been doing better recently. I haven't been following them much. Just been more focused on the Bills off season than anything. But obviously now we're in the dead period of that, so just peeking my eyes around, seeing how the Yankees are.
Yeah, I haven't really been following that closely either, but it's like I said, up and down. They can't seem to pull it together. And I saw the other day that they had the second worst batting average in the league behind Oakland. Oakland is like 25 and 65 right now. So to have a batting average only 10 points above them, that's pretty bad. So they need Aaron Judge back in the worst way.
Yeah, they do. They also, definitely need to work on the hitting.
Yeah, now have you seen Ellie De La Cruz with Cincinnati? Because he is taking over the league just like Shohei Ohtani. I mean, those two guys right there are the new faces of baseball, at least as of right now. I know it's still very early in De La Cruz's career, but he has burst onto the scene, especially with what he did yesterday.
I do not know what he did yesterday, but I have seen some Sports Center highlights of him, and well, good for him.
Yeah, so if you guys are unaware, Ellie De La Cruz stole second, stole third, and then he stole home, all within a pitch or two. So just insane intelligence and speed, and he has power. Like he was exactly what Cincinnati needed because Cincinnati is 50-40, and they are sitting atop the NL Central right now. And they pretty much came out of nowhere. And I don't mind supporting Cincinnati. I do not support the Bengals, but I was in Cincinnati a few summers ago. I went to their ballpark and I was like, you know what? They're a small market team. I want to see them back in the playoffs. It's been a long time. So I can get behind the Reds. Definitely not the Bengals. But, the Reds are cool. They're in the NL. Doesn't really affect the Yankees. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what they can do here and what transpires the rest of the way. We have the All-Star break coming up. Actually, yeah, tomorrow's the home run derby and then the All-Star game. So that just came up out of nowhere on us.
Right, yep. They do the Yeah, I honestly always forget about the All-Star game, especially the last few years.
Yeah, usually I'm working, so I usually don't get to watch it. So we'll see how much I can get to watch this year. But it should definitely be exciting because it's in Seattle, correct?
I honestly don't know. Like I said, I haven't been following baseball that much, but
All right. Well, once again, good afternoon. We have a question here. Sup? Why so early? So I have a family function going on later tonight. So luckily, Zach and Bryce were able to join me right now. It is 1:20 p.m. here in beautiful Fredonia, New York. Once again, we want to apologize. We're having some connection issues where it is lagging big time on us today. Apparently, it's not just me. Zach's dealing with it too, and Bryce. We are also not on Facebook for whatever reason. We lost a connection there, so we're working on getting that back. But we did post the YouTube link on our Facebook channel if you guys want to go check that out. I mean, obviously, you're right here on YouTube, so you don't have to. But if you want to tell someone else, um, that's the deal right there. So as far as I know, we're streaming live right now on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, and you can find us on Facebook. We apologize for the technical difficulties. It seems like it's something different every week, but hey, that's the beauty of podcasting, right? So, all right, Zach, we're we're gonna try to get through this here. Um, if I can't hear you, I might just resort to the chat, or I might just remove you for a little bit until it hopefully it can sync up again, and then we can talk about these linebackers. But yeah, so today we are talking about the top 10 linebackers in the NFL heading into the 2023 season. And it was interesting because we posted on our page yesterday about how the coaches and executives came out with their list. I believe it was Jeremy Fowler who tweeted it yesterday. So it was kind of ironic how it was back to back days. And before we get into my list here, Zach, what do you think about the coaches and the executives ranking Tremaine Edmunds over Matt Milano?
I think it's interesting because obviously Edmonds is the one that seems to get more attention from the media and the national media. But locally, I think the Bills media and Bills fans would tell you that Matt Milano is better than Tremaine Edmonds, and I agree with that.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like there's this weird stigma with Edmunds where he got paid. He is, I believe, the fourth highest paid linebacker now, making 18 million per year. Chicago gave him his bag. And I think people on the outside look at Edmunds and say he's 6'5, he's 250, he's only 25 years old. He is one of the best linebackers in the league. And it's like, well, hold up a sec. If you actually watch the tape, if you were Bills fans and you see, you can tell that Tremaine Edmunds might not be as good as you think. Now, I will say Tremaine Edmunds is very good, and I think he's still getting better, and I think he's really going to pop off in Chicago. But based on what we saw over the last 5 years, he's not in that top tier yet. And, just getting right into it with my honorable mentions, that's where I have Tremaine, where I think that he is an honorable mention, and I just can't really put him in the top 10 yet. I think you can make a case for sure, but I just don't see Tremaine Edmunds being a top 10 linebacker as of right now, based on what we know. I think he can be within the next few months if he really shows up and shows out these first few weeks in Chicago. Then it's like, oh man, look at this guy. That's a great signing for the Bears. But based on what we saw as Bills fans and how maybe he wouldn't make the big play, or he would get sucked up by his blocks, or he would take the wrong route or bad angle, I think an honorable mention is a good spot for Edmunds right now.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I think he is in the top, probably in the top 15, top 20, but he's not quite in the top 10 yet. Obviously, the fact that coaches and executives think he is, I guess, goes to show what they think of him as a player and why Chicago was willing to shell out the money they did for him. But again, I still think Matt Milano in Buffalo has produced more than Tremaine Edmunds did in his time.
Yeah, so I would have to pull up that list again. I have a bunch of different things going on here trying to make sure that we don't lose connection. So I will try to get that in the meantime. But they had Edmonds at 3 and Milano at 4, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, yeah. And even that's weird because I don't think that they are that close. Like, even if you were to say Tremaine Edmonds is a top 10 linebacker, then I don't think that him and Milano are back to back. I think Matt Milano is definitely way above Tremaine Edmonds.
I agree with that. I don't think it's very close either.
Yeah, so I think that's just the casual football fan. That's just like the general, like, oh, Tremaine Edmonds, he's a really good linebacker. He's got the money, so he must be good, right? He's 6'5", 250, he's really young. And while that is true, he's just not there yet. He is not a top 3 linebacker. He's top 3, technically top 4 in terms of money and average annual value, but not talent.
Yeah, and I just pulled up the list here. So, according to the executives, players, scouts, and coaches, this is their top 10. Number 10 was Dre Greenlaw. Number 9, CJ Mosley. Number 8, Nick Bolton. Number 7, Shaquille Leonard. Number 6, Demario Davis. 5, Devin White. Milano 4, Edmonds 3, Roquan Smith 2, and Fred Warner number 1.
So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of names on there that you guys will see in my list coming up here. But, two big names that stick out, Bobby Wagner and Levante David. How do you leave those guys off the list?
Well, I think the question would be more of if this is in regards to like heading into this season, I think you could make a case where they're not quite on the list. But again, in that maybe 11 to 15, 11 to 20 range just for this current year. But if you're looking at like the past few years, then yeah, Bobby Wagner and Levante David should be on the top 10 list.
I mean, whether you're looking at the past, the future, or the current, I think that they have to be in the top 10. I mean, as you will see coming up with these numbers, their production hasn't dropped at all. I mean, these guys are iron horses where they just get the job done year in and year out. So I guess that kind of segues into more of my article here, Zach. Not getting into the specifics yet because I don't want to give away any of the numbers, but what do you think of my rankings in general? Because those are two guys who, I guess I will spoil it. They are in my top 10. I don't want to give away numbers as to how high or low I put them, but just what did you think of my list in general?
I think in general, the list is good. Like, you can make a case for most of the people on the list. You can make a case for all of them. I do think that, again, there's like maybe one that was a bit unexpected, but also at the same time, when you made your case for it, it made sense. And you could always, I think you can always debate the actual placement on the list for some of them. You could debate that all day, but overall, I think you did well with that.
Okay, yeah. So, I still have the banner up for honorable mention. So let's get into that now because I feel like there are a lot of names that you could put in as top 10, but I didn't because I think that the guys that I have on there are definitely warranted for that, or else I wouldn't have put them on there. But these are guys like Tremaine Edmunds and other veterans like Eric Kendricks, who I think they are right on that brink. Someone like a CJ Mosley where they could be in that 11 to 15 range, where I just don't think that overall, based on where they're at in their careers and production wise, that they could slide into that top 10 role. But I think that they're right there.
Yeah, and I agree. Like we said, Edmonds, he's younger and still entering the prime of his career. He can absolutely crack the top 10 within the next year or two. Right now, as it stands, I don't think he's there. Eric Kendricks is another guy who's been dependable for a long time. Definitely overlooked in some circles, but again, not quite in the top 10. Devondre Campbell, I think considering his last couple years in Green Bay, he has definitely put himself in the conversation. And I think those are all good honorable mentions right there. And you like you said, they're in the conversation but not quite there yet.
I'm glad you mentioned Devondre Campbell because he was in my honorable mentions as well. And I think the word that you use to describe those guys is perfect. They're dependable. You know what you're going to get year in and year out. And usually they're pretty much at that same line where it's like, okay, Eric Kendricks, you can rely on him for 100 plus tackles, veteran leadership, Devondre Campbell, same thing. And Tremaine Edmunds to a point too. And there are some other guys like the Dolphins have David Long Jr. now. They have Jerome Baker. The Bengals have Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt back. So I mean, there are a lot of guys in there. Leighton Vander Esch with the Cowboys, where you could look at that and say, okay, that there are a lot of guys in that 11 to 15 to 20 range, but they're not top 10 yet. And before I let you comment on that, I was really shocked when I was doing my research here. And do you know how many guys had 150 plus tackles last season? Not just based on my list, just in general. How many players in the NFL registered more than 150 tackles during the 2022 season?
I'm going to guess less than 10.
No, it was 10. 10 players had more than 150 tackles, and 3 of them were in my top 10 list, and the other 7, I was like, "You know what? I feel like I definitely have to mention these guys because that's almost foreign territory." Because, I mean, we have seen a lot of guys rack up tackles over the years, but I feel like as of late, we haven't seen it to this extreme where I was going through and sifting through the years a little bit, and you have your occasional 5, 6, 7 players, but to have 10 players with more than 150 tackles, I was like, what was happening? Are they changing their defenses? Is it because it's more of a passing first league now where there's more opportunity for tackles? But then maybe that wouldn't make sense because then you have more chances for incomplete passes where maybe when it's ground and pound, you would be tackling more. So I don't know what the reason is, but yeah, 10 players had 150 or more tackles this year. So those guys were I didn't want to label them as honorable mentions just because someone like an Alex Singleton, I'm not sure if he is there yet where I could rank him over someone like a Devondre Campbell. But again, his name definitely needed to be mentioned. So the 7 that I have in this little section of the article, which by the way, I will post the link to the article after I get done with this. So that way you guys can follow along here. But Foyesade Aloakon with Jacksonville had 184 tackles for the Jaguars. And this is his second year in a row that he's eclipsed 183 tackles. Last year, he had 194. So this dude is just a tackling machine.
Yeah, no,
You have any thoughts
Jacksonville's.
on Aloakon, Zach?
Well, I'll say that Jacksonville had a pretty interesting year last year. And like we always talked about their offense, but I guess yeah, he was one of those guys where I think he was a name you didn't really know of until you started hearing about him last year. But like you said, he's had a good couple of years.
Yeah, and he just kind of came out of nowhere. He started his career with Atlanta, and then he signed with the Jaguars. And see, like the knock on him is his coverage grades. He's not the best in pass coverage, but he did get a lot better last year. So that's a perfect example where he has the numbers. The numbers just totally pop out at you. But I just can't put him there yet based on how he covers. But I think he could definitely get into the top 10 within the next year.
He could. I do think it's important to note though, in terms of talking about tackles, a high tackle number doesn't automatically mean that they are like, the best at their position because there are different types of tackles. There are tackles at the line. You could be tackling someone 5 yards, 10 yards downfield. But yeah, looking at Oluokwan's stats, wow. Like 2021 with Atlanta, he had 192. That's just like an insane number to me. And then 184 this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what he can do in year 3 with the Jaguars. And then after Aloakon, Zaire Franklin, Alex Singleton, Jordan Brooks, Rashawn Evans, CJ Mosley, and Bobby Okereke, who signed with the Giants. And Rashawn Evans is still a free agent. But those 6 guys, again, someone like a Jordan Brooks, maybe he's not the best linebacker overall, but when these guys are getting 150, 160, 170 tackles, I definitely felt like I had to at least mention them.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, all right. Now that we have talked about the honorable mentions, We'll get into the top 10 now. Again, want to apologize for any lagginess or loss of connection that we are dealing with right now, but something that we're just going to have to keep fighting through. So, number 10, Nick Bolton with Kansas City. This is a guy who really exploded onto the scene. He was drafted in the second round of the 2021 draft by Kansas City, and he had 112 tackles his rookie season. Was pretty solid, nothing too crazy. And then last year, just totally went off. Was second in the entire league with 180 tackles, and he graded out very well with PFF as well. He had a 75.7 grade.
I do think Nick Bolton is one of those up and coming linebackers in the league. I will note this too, that last year Kansas City's defense was middle of the pack in points against. And they were one of, but Kansas City always has that defense where it's like they don't rank the best in statistics, but they always play a lot better on the field, especially when it counts. And that's why they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Nick Bolton is another example of Kansas City being able to draft and develop their players no matter what round, whether it's Nick Bolton in round 2, Isaiah Pacheco in round 7, or, take your pick. Any of these guys, it seems like their coaching can always bring the best out of their players. And it's really annoying as a Bills fan, but you got to respect it.
True.
So do you have any final thoughts on Nick Bolton before we move on? I guess maybe a better question is, do you think number 10 is a good spot for Bolton? I did not rank him last year, and, rightfully so. He was just a rookie, had an above average season. Like I said, nothing too crazy, but this year, 180 tackles. He improved his PFF grade from a 69 to a 75. You think 10 is a good spot for him?
I think 10 is a good spot for him this year. And he'll probably end up ranking higher next year.
Yeah. So we'll see what he can do in year 3 with the Chiefs. Now, speaking of another guy who really just took the bull by the horns here, I don't know if this is controversial or not, because I saw some other sites had him in this same range. But at number 9, I went with TJ Edwards. Now, he is the new duo with Tremaine Edmunds in Chicago. And again, he had 2 really, really good years for Philadelphia. And he was another one of those guys that I mentioned in the top 10 of tackles. I believe he ranked 7th because he had 159 in 2022. And he also recorded a PFF grade of 84.8. So this is a guy that was getting it done in all aspects. And one other thing about Edwards is that he finished above a 78 with his pass rush, run defense, and coverage grades. So he has really taken his game to the next level.
Yep, he earned his contract from Chicago, that's for sure.
So what do you think about him and Edmunds being the new tandem with the Bears? Because, Edmunds got the money, and TJ Edwards had more production by far than Edmunds, but his contract was 3 years, 19.5 million. So the money really isn't there. That was a very team-friendly deal for TJ Edwards. And I know Tremaine Edmunds probably has more of the name than TJ Edwards, but Edwards has more of the production. So how do you feel about the way that unfolded with the 2 contracts? 4 years, 72 million with Edmunds, 3 years, 19.5 with Edwards.
Well, to circle back to our earlier discussion about Edmunds and Milano, I think it just goes to show again what executives and coaches, specifically Chicago's coach, GM, and maybe some of the players think of Edmunds and how highly he's regarded in the league versus Edwards, who didn't crack that top 10 list. But maybe they still held a good high regard for him because otherwise they wouldn't have signed him, but just not nearly as much as they did Edmunds.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely interesting how the rest of the NFL world views Tremaine Edmunds, and I hope the best for Tremaine, but again, I feel like he's a little bit overrated from non-Bills fans and the media. But hey, I hope that he really pops off for the Bears because I'm rooting for Tremaine. All right, moving on to number 8. I had Dre Greenlaw, and this guy had a career year for the 49ers last year. And I didn't rank him last year because he was battling through some injuries and he missed most of the 21 season due to injury. But then he came back this past season. He had a career high 127 tackles, 6 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, an interception, and an 81.2 PFF grade. And he improved his coverage grade from a 62.9 to an 82.7. And this is a guy who matches up very well with Fred Warner. And I think that they are arguably the best tandem of linebackers in the NFL. I mean, we just got done talking about a duo in Chicago, but I think this is the ultimate duo in terms of what you want to aspire to be as 2 linebackers in the NFL.
Yeah, now that Edmunds is in Chicago, I would agree. San Fran probably has the best linebacking duo.
Yeah, can you imagine if the Bills did re-sign Edmunds? How would Edmunds and Milano rank in terms of duos? I mean, they would definitely be a top 5 duo, but how close would they actually be to Warner and Greenlaw, or any other duo for that matter?
Well, we already knew what we saw in the field. Tremaine Edmunds and Matt Milano were a top 5 linebacking duo, probably even top 2. But again, Edmunds moved on to Chicago, so now it's a mystery because we don't know who is going to start next to him at middle linebacker, which I know we're going to talk about that a little later in the show. So, as for Greenlaw, yeah, he's a very good player, and he is another one of those guys that has the respect of everyone around the league. And that's why he made that top 10 list. And that's why I feel he deserves to be on 10 list too.
Now, when I was reading up on Greenlaw, do you know who they're comparing him and Warner to?
I mean, having read your article, I have it right here. I could say it out, but do you want to say it out or you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead. You already got it.
Okay. so according to what you wrote in your article, based on what you saw, Greenlaw and Fred Warner are being compared to Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, being like their new version of that. And that's pretty high praise too.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Because what do you think of that? Because growing up, that pretty much was a dynamic duo out in the Bay Area, and those guys retired, and then they kind of had to go through a little bit of a rebuild. And then they both get these guys, I believe, right around that 2018, 2019 timeframe. And they're arguably right up there in terms of talent. I mean, I don't want to say that they're there yet because those two guys are potential Hall of Famers, but they didn't fall off too much in terms of losing that dynamic duo.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comparison for them too. Obviously, Patrick Willis is one of the greatest linebackers, of our lifetime, or at least of the since the new millennia. He's been one of the best. That's why he's been on the Hall of Fame ballot. And Navarro Bowman was a good linebacker for a while. It's a shame that injuries cut both of their careers short. But and I think Greenlaw and Warner are both very good in today's NFL. And that's why they should be regarded as one of the top, if not the top duo.
Yeah, so I mean, they still have a little ways to go in terms of trying to get to that level of Bowman and Willis, but I thought it was definitely interesting when I saw that because I used to think about the San Fran defense when I was younger, and I was like, man, they're losing a lot of talent. What are they going to do here? But then they just restocked and replenished, and it's like, oh, okay. Because I think the other part of that was I was trying to figure out when Patrick Willis and Bowman retired because I don't think these guys played with any of the two former guys, right? They retired before Warner and Greenlaw got to San Fran.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Patrick Willis retired early because of injuries. Forgot what year he retired. I think it was early 2010s. And then Bowman went to the Raiders for a couple of years after San Fran and then retired. But yeah, I think it was around the time when Jim Harbaugh was fired. So it was like that great exodus of San Fran talent.
All right. Well, moving on to number 7. Now, this is a guy who could be really good, and he still is really good, but he just dealt through a plethora of injuries last year, and that is Shaquille Leonard. I still want to say Darius Leonard, but it is Shaquille Leonard. I'm just starting to get used to it. But yeah, he had a bunch of nerve injuries going on in his back. So he had offseason surgery last June. And then he tried coming back from that, got a concussion, broke his nose, played in a few more games, was still dealing with the nerve issues. And now he should be coming back for a fully healthy season this year.
Yeah, Shaquille Leonard has always been one of the top linebackers. And again, like you said, last year he had to deal with his fair share of injuries, and that's why he kind of dropped off a little. But yeah, he definitely deserves to be on this list, and I think number 7 is a fine spot to put him for this year, pending how he is healthy again. If he can return to his form, if he can return to healthy All Pro caliber form, then he'll be back higher on the list next year.
Yeah, like when he is healthy, he is really good because he's been in the league for 5 years now, and he had at least 121 tackles in each of his first 4 seasons while being named an All Pro 4 times and a Pro Bowler 3 times. So he is definitely in that top tier when healthy. But, based on the year that he had last year, I couldn't put him anywhere higher than this spot, and you'll see why coming up. You there, Zach, or did I lose you again?
No, I'm here. I was just waiting for you. I thought you were gonna say
All right.
something
Well,
else.
with that, we'll just move on to number 6 here. Say it again.
I didn't say anything.
Okay. Well, did you have any other thoughts on Shaq Leonard?
No, I think we already covered him, basically, pretty well.
All right. So now we'll move on to number 6. And this is just one of the most durable players in the NFL, Demario Davis. Now, do you have any thoughts on Demario Davis before I fill you guys in about one of my favorite linebackers?
Like we were talking about with Eric Kendrick and Devondre Campbell, Demario Davis has been dependable for a long time, and he was a very good linebacker everywhere he went, from the Jets to the Browns to the Saints. And actually, I almost feel like he may have gotten better once he got to the Saints.
Yeah, he like ages like fine wine. He just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, and he finally got his recognition the last 4 years. Like, he's been a good linebacker since like 2013, but he's finally gotten his recognition since 2019 with the Saints. He's been an All-Pro each of the last 4 years. Got his first Pro Bowl nod. Not that Pro Bowl means much anymore, but still got the nod.
Yeah, so he had 109 tackles, a career high 6.5 sacks, and an 82.7 PFF grade. It was his sixth straight season of having 105 or more tackles and a PFF grade above 73. And it was his fourth straight year being named an All-Pro. And like you said, it was the first year that he had ever been named to the Pro Bowl. And like I said in the article, then again, it's a Pro Bowl, so take that with a grain of salt. But this is a stat that I love about Demario Davis the most. He's 34 years old, and over his 11-year career, so 177 games, he has only missed one game. That's it. One game that he's missed. The definition of durable.
He's only missed. Wait, how? You say he's only missed one game? Oh yeah, that's right. They just switched to 17. When did they switch to 17 games? What was it?
I believe that was a 21 season.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I was trying to remember if it was 2021. So yeah, if it was 21, then yeah, you're right.
So do you think that this is a good spot for him, or should he be higher based on that durability? Because segueing into number 5 here, I might as well just do that right now. I have Levante David. So I guess I'll lump these two together. And really number 4 too. Let's just get that out of the way right now. Bobby Wagner is number 4. So I don't want to say struggling, but I figured based on their age and what we know about them, I figured this is a good spot where I didn't want to put those guys any higher because I feel like there are some younger, better athletes coming up right now, as you will see in a few seconds. So I figured 4, 5, and 6 would be a good spot for these guys. Those executives didn't even have Levante David and Bobby Wagner in their top 10. So how do you feel about that, Zach? Do you think this is that sweet spot for these veterans? I mean, they're all 33, 34 years old.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for him because, like you said, Bobby Wagner has been probably one of the most recognized middle linebackers in the league for the past decade. Levante David has also been one of the best for a long time. Demario Davis, like you said, he's been underrated and is finally getting his flowers, as people would say. But again, there are also some younger guys who are performing at a higher level right now that deserve more recognition right now.
Well, just a couple of things on Levante David and Bobby Wagner. So, in terms of last season, Levante David had 124 tackles, 3 sacks, and an 84.1 PFF grade. In 11 seasons, he has recorded more than 100 tackles in 9 of them, and he has not missed a game in 7 of those seasons. So, just like Demario Davis, I mean, these guys are just workhorses. And then Bobby Wagner, he had 140 tackles last year, a career high 6 sacks, and a league best among his position, 90.7 PFF grade, while also playing all 17 games for the Rams. And this is a stat that I love about Bobby Wagner the most. He has played 11 seasons in the NFL, and he has never finished a season with fewer than 104 tackles. He's just amazing.
Yeah, Bobby Wagner is again, like I said, one of the best linebackers we've seen in the past decade. And I believe too, what's funny is I remember a while ago somebody, I think it was the NFL on CBS Twitter account, tweeted out it was like all the active tackle leaders, or the most tackles, the players with the most tackles since 2000. Bobby Wagner is the only active linebacker with it close to even breaking that top mark, and the top mark is held by London Fletcher, who hasn't played in over a decade.
Yeah, and I put in the article, he is currently 9th all time with 1,523 total tackles. So, I mean, what else can this guy do? And, as much as I wanted him in a Bills uniform, it just feels right that he's back in Seattle?
Yeah, that it really didn't surprise me at all.
So, let's talk about a guy who is in Buffalo, and that is Mr. Matthew Milano. So, I guess my first question here is, what do you think about him being ranked as the third best linebacker? We all know how good he is. We all know what he brings to the table. But in terms of these rankings, how do you feel about that, Zach? Because I was trying to do this very non-biased, and I think that his play warrants this spot. His numbers don't pop out at you, but if you actually sit down and watch Matt Milano play, it's more of a quality versus quantity aspect with him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why Bills fans love him so much. And that's why when we initially saw that list we talked about earlier that was tweeted out, everyone was like, Edmunds over Milano. It's because, again, he may not give you all the numbers. Like, he may not get you 190 tackles, but he does impact the game in a huge way. He is such a good coverage linebacker. Like, if he's covering the offensive player is not going to get very far. Usually won't get very far. And also just seeing, it's also fun because he can also do a little bit of everything. Like, you see him on the blitz a decent amount. And he's just as good as that as he is in coverage. And again, he's also, as a lot of people know, he is also very handsome, and people like him because of that. But mostly his on-field gameplay is why he warrants the number 3 spot.
Yeah, so like we were saying, his numbers don't necessarily pop out at you. In his 6 seasons, he's only recorded more than 100 tackles one time, and that came back in 2019, and I believe it was just 101 tackles, so it wasn't even anything crazy like a Bobby Wagner 140 or any of these other guys who are racking up 150 plus. And PFF has never really graded him that highly either. His highest PFF grade was back in 2018, Josh Allen's rookie season, and Tremaine Edmunds for that matter. He had a 76.1. But again, it's more quality over quantity with Matt Milano. And he is just a staple on the Bills defense because when he is not on the field, you will know. Like that Jets game last year, you could definitely feel his absence. And according to CBS, this is a quote that I found. Milano and TJ Watt are the only players in the NFL with 25 or more tackles for loss and multiple interceptions since the start of the 21 season. Plus, quarterbacks had just a 62.6 rating when targeting Milano last year. So it really takes a Bills fan, someone who watches the games very closely, to know how valuable Matt Milano really is.
Exactly.
So, do you think 3 is a good spot for him, Zach? Because, tying this in with the guys that I put 4 through 6, last year I had Bobby Wagner as a second best linebacker. And to be honest, he didn't really do anything to drop off. I mean, he still had a Bobby Wagner type season. Same thing with Levante David. Levante David actually got better since the 21 season. And Demario Davis too had a Demario Davis type season. So do you think that they could have been flipped here and Milano should be a little bit further back and Bobby Wagner and David and Davis should move up? Or do you think that this is accurate based on everything that we just talked about with watching Matt Milano and not just looking at the box scores?
I I think number 3 is a perfect spot for Milano. But I think if you it would be understandable if he was in the 3 to 5 range. Anywhere I could understand it. I think number 3 is good.
All right. Well, moving on. Actually, before we move on here, ZMad Mafia asks, where did ESPN rank Milano? I don't have ESPN Plus. Neither do I. So I'm not sure. I know that the executives in their rankings yesterday put him 4th, right behind Tremaine Edmunds. And I know that PFF and Pro Football Network also had Milano in that 3 to 6 range. So it seems like everyone knows that Matt Milano is a top 10 linebacker now. Some even top 5. Now it's just a matter of what spot do you want to put him? Do you want to put him 3? Do you want to put him 4, 5, 6? But I think everyone can agree he's within this range now.
Yep.
All right. Well, going to number 2 then, I have Roquan Smith. Now, Roquan Smith requested a trade at this time last year. He didn't get it until the trade deadline, and he showed up and he showed out for both of his teams last year. He had 83 tackles in 8 games for the Bears. Then he had 86 tackles in 9 games for Baltimore. So he had 169 total tackles, and he had a career year, and the Ravens rewarded him by giving him a 5-year, $100 million contract extension back in January, making him the highest paid linebacker in NFL history.
Yep. And he's earned it. Like he has been a very good linebacker his entire career in Chicago and then with Baltimore. And he got what he was due. And of course that reset the market, and I think that's part of the reason why Edmonds got as much as he did too. But and in Baltimore's defense, he should thrive for years to come.
Yeah, so according to CBS, in weeks 1 through 8 without Smith, the Ravens allowed 22.9 points per game and 364.3 total yards per game. Weeks 9 through 18 with Roquan Smith, those numbers dropped to 14.7 points per game and 288.8 yards per game. So he was named first team All Pro and a Pro Bowler for the first time in his career. He was a second team All Pro twice as well, but in terms of being named first team, last year was definitely a career year for Roquan Smith. All right. And number one, I have Fred Warner. We talked about him a little bit already with Greenlaw, but Warner just seems to be that classic middle linebacker who can do everything. He can defend the run and the pass, and that's what separates him from the rest of the pack here. If you might be asking, like, well, why is Fred Warner number one? He only had 130 tackles. His PFF grade was about an 84. So, I mean, those are nice numbers, but nothing that's too crazy. Like Roquan Smith, 169 tackles, but Fred Warner is one of the best cover linebackers in the league. He can go sideline to sideline. He can go up the sideline chasing running backs on wheel routes. He can cover tight ends, like whatever you want him to do. Fred Warner can do it. So he is my top linebacker going into the 2023 season.
I think that's a very good place for him. I agree with it. Like he has been one of the best linebackers for the past few years, and he came right in as a third round pick in 2018 and just started producing for San Fran. But I think he just piqued the national interest in 2020 when he got his first All Pro and Pro Bowl selections. But yeah, over the last couple of years, he has been in that top 5 conversation, and he deserves to be at the top of the list right now.
Yeah, last year I had him at number 4, but I think the way he played last year definitely warrants him jumping up to number 1. Quarterbacks only completed 60.3% of their passes when they targeted Warner last year, and his overall PFF grade of 83.7 ranked in the top tier. And like you said, he was a third round pick from BYU, and he's had at least 118 tackles in all 5 seasons he's been in the league. And him and Dre Greenlaw are definitely quite the duo out there. And, I saw on, I think it was ESPN or Bleacher Report, they just posted on Instagram some new players and their new threads. I forgot the 49ers got Javon Hargrave too. So that defense is really going to be nasty.
Yeah. I know. San Fran defense has been one of those pretty good defenses over the last couple of years, and maybe doesn't necessarily get as much love as they should. But now you add Javon Hargrave to the mix. Oh, they're going to be so much better. That I totally forgot about that as well. Like, yeah, imagine having him and Nick Bosa coming at you.
Yeah, really. So we'll see what San Fran does with their quarterback position, because we know their defense is going to be good, right?
Yeah, their defense should be good. I think their offense will be fine. If we've learned anything from Kyle Shanahan, is he could stick a piece of plywood at quarterback and still get over 3,000 yards and from it.
All right. Well, with that, we are about an hour into the show. Once again, this is Kevin Syracuse and Zach Vaughn with you here on this afternoon special of Buffalo Fanatics, the BF Writers Club. And joining us now will be Bryce Martino. Let me just get rid of this banner of Fred Warner so we can put Bryce Martino on here. Did I just compare Bryce to Fred Warner? I don't know. Maybe I did. Anyways, Here he is,
I respect that
as
compliment.
Bryce
Thank you for
joins
that.
the show at Bills by Bryce at the Football Analyst. Bryce, what do you think about? Yeah, no problem. So, before we get into the Bills linebacker situation and who's going to replace Tremaine Edmunds, what do you think about the list that we just composed here?
I think it's a pretty good list. I like that you put Nick Bolton up there and Dre Greenlaw at 8. I think was very fair. Both of them had tremendous seasons and were pretty much the main piece to their respective teams' defenses that really put them over the top. I am surprised that you didn't put Devin White in the top 10, though. I thought he really, deserved to be on that list. But overall, I think it's, pretty good list.
Who were you saying deserves to be in the top 10? The one that stood out to you that we left off?
Devin White.
Really? Okay. It's funny you say that because when I saw that list, I was thinking, why would you put him at number 5? Because he's just not that good. And I was getting him confused with Devin Bush. So
Yeah.
I will at least listen to that because Devin White is better than Devin Bush. But I don't know if he's top 10 worthy. But thanks for bringing him up because I think, he could at least be an honorable mention.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are there any other guys that maybe we left off the list here, Bryce, where you're sitting there thinking, oh, you got to talk about this guy or you got to talk about that guy? Because don't forget, we also did edge rushers last week. So if you're wondering why we left off some outside linebackers, they're probably included with the edge rushers here. So these are mainly off-ball linebackers. So are there any off-ball linebackers that you can think of where you're like, oh man, you guys should have included. Actually, I'm just going to name one right now. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He could definitely be an honorable mention as well.
Yeah, I think JOK could definitely be an honorable mention. Tremaine Edmunds, I think, could at the very least be an honorable mention as well, if not, number 10 on this list. Because hate on him all you want. I don't care if, I don't think you despise him, but I'm just saying he was a top 10 linebacker last year. His production really improved, as the year went on. So I definitely think he can, at the very least, be honorable mention.
Now, how do you fare on the whole Edmunds talk in terms of Milano? Like, what do you think about Edmunds being ranked 3rd, Milano 4th?
I don't really agree with that too much, and I'll give Edmunds my respect and give him his dues and all that, but I don't think he's a better linebacker than Milano has been over his 6 years in the league so far. I've really liked what I've seen from Milano. I think he's probably a top 3, top 4 linebacker in this league right now. Every game that he's missed due to injury, our production, either in coverage or as at pass rush, is really depleted.
So, what number would you put Edmunds at? Because, I flirted with the idea of having him in that 8 to 10 range, but even that, I was just like, I don't know if I can do that yet. I think he's more deserving of an honorable mention. So, where do you side with that?
Yeah, I think I would put him around the TJ Edwards number, maybe 8 or 9. I think that's pretty fair for him.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're all in agreement for the most part about how how we view these linebackers heading into the 2023 season, right?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So now the main question here, tying this in with the Bills, who starts at middle linebacker to replace the aforementioned Tremaine Edmunds? So let's just get right into it right off the bat. Is it Dorian Williams? Is it AJ Klein? Is it Terrell Dodson? Balin Spector? Is it Terrell Bernard? What do we got here? Zach, what do you think? We'll start with you.
So my thought has been ever since the draft and they didn't take one first round, they didn't take Jack Campbell. My thought has been that most likely, and again, this is based on what we know about McDermott and how he usually tries to ease rookies in. I think right now, the starting middle linebacker for week 1 would be Tyrell Dodson. He has the most experience at the position of all the guys on the roster right now. And that's the key caveat, at that position. Because Tyrell Dodson was Tremaine Edmunds' backup for the past 2 years. So I think initially their plan is to pencil him in, and then they'll maybe let Bernard and Dorian see how they do in camp in the preseason, and eventually, if one of those two impresses more than Dodson, then they would make the switch. And I think considering the buzz around Dorian Williams ever since he was drafted, I think he would be the most likely to replace him long term. But for week 1, Tyrell Dodson.
I think I would have to agree with you on that. Before I give my reasoning why, Bryce, what's your money on? Who do you think is the Bills' starting middle linebacker week 1, Monday Night Football at New York, New Jersey?
I think it's going to be Dorian Williams. You know, as much as McDermott's tried to downplay this whole, Dorian Williams playing middle linebacker week 1, I don't agree with that. I think they're just doing it for just to talk, so they don't reveal too much. Yeah, I mean Dorian Williams has just looked I don't want to say fantastic so far this spring, but he's looked really good. I don't think you can draft him as high as you did and not, at least give him a shot to play week 1 at middle linebacker.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how Dorian Williams does.
So who do you think they're rolling out Monday night?
It's got to be Dorian.
I will be intrigued to see what he does in training camp in the preseason. See how he adapts.
What was that, Bryce?
Dorian Williams. It's got to be him starting week 1.
Oh, okay. So I'm more on the side with Zach here, where I think it's going to be Dodson, because I think the Bills did learn their lesson last year where they can't slow play their rookies, guys like Kyer Elam and James Cook and Khalil Shakir. But at the same time, don't forget, this is a team, specifically a head coach and Sean McDermott, who started Nathan Peterman over Josh Allen. And at the time, I think probably a lot of us would have done that because we didn't know how bad Nathan Peterman was going to be and how good Josh was going to be. But I don't think that they're going to run this kid out and say, okay, go defend Aaron Rodgers Monday Night Football. I think that's why they brought Tyrell Dodson back. I think that's why they brought AJ Klein back, because they want to ease him into the NFL. And a point that we've made on this show before and other shows is that the defense was way more simple in college for Dorian Williams at Tulane, where now it ramps up at the NFL level and they're teaching him different positions. So not only is he playing middle linebacker, he's also playing outside linebacker. And I think that's why you bring those two veterans back to say, okay, be that bridge gap while he continues to learn our system. So I would be shocked if Dorian Williams is a starting middle linebacker come week 1. My money is on either Terrell Dodson or AJ Klein.
Yeah, I think that too. As of right now. This is all subject to change.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun battle to watch come
Now,
training camp.
if it does come down to not Dorian Williams, I think it will be Dorian Williams eventually. But yeah, if it comes down to Terrell Dodson and AJ Klein, who do we think wins that battle? Let's exclude all the young guys for now. So Balen Spector, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, and any other guy who may be floating around on the practice squad. And it's just Dodson and Klein. Who do we like out of those guys?
Out of Dorian, Dodson, and Klein?
Dodson and Klein.
No
guys
Dorian, just
excluded.
Dodson and Klein.
Okay. Just those two? Again, I think out of those two, I still think Dodson, just because he's had more experience at middle linebacker than AJ Klein has. Even though I know that AJ Klein has more experience with Sean McDermott and in that system, I just don't really see Klein as more than like a depth / practice squad guy at this point.
Yeah, Klein was with McDermott in Carolina from 2013 to 2016, but he's never really been that starter. Back in 2020, he was for that 1 year with the Bills. So I guess you could say, well, recency bias suggests that they could do that again. But I don't know. I just think it's Terrell Dodson. I think I might be in the minority, but I think Dodson did a pretty solid job filling in for Edmunds over the last couple of years. Bryce, what do you think?
We don't even know if AJ Klein's going to make this roster right now with how much depth we have at the middle linebacker position. So I would have to give it to Tyrell Dodson.
Yeah, and I always go back to this, but Dodson, I think, expected to be gone at the end of the season. He said his goodbyes, and then next thing you know, he's back. So, I don't know. Do you guys read into that the way I do?
Read into what? Sorry.
Dodson saying his goodbyes.
The fact that Dodson back. Yeah.
Oh, well, I think it's just like off season. That was just like end of season chatter, and maybe he was just preparing in the event he wasn't back. Because I feel like sometimes players do that, but then they end up coming back anyways, like Dodson did. It's just like, you never know in this league. The NFL stands for not for long, right?
Now, what do you guys think about this guy right here, Travin Howard? I'll be honest, I don't know much about him, so I can't speak on him too much. But do you guys have any thoughts about this guy?
Not really. I think at this point, he's probably he's fighting for a backup spot / special teams, where he's probably in the same boat as like Joe Giles Harris or even Andre Smith before
Practice
him.
squad linebacker.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Fighting for that 53rd spot, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way I don't think that he could win the job for starting middle linebacker, but it's definitely worth talking about because there's no real just giveaway right here. There's no Tremaine Edmunds in terms of, oh, that's your starting middle linebacker. When the Bills walk off the bus, I don't think that you could pick a guy out of the crowd and say, oh, that's the guy that's starting at middle linebacker at Monday Night Football. Like maybe before you would look at Edmunds and say, oh, we got to be careful running up the middle on this guy. But if you look at the Bills linebacking core right now, obviously there's Matt Milano, but behind him, it's just like, okay, like no one really pops out at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of what ifs on this roster.
Yeah.
Now, what do you guys think about Terrell Bernard? This is very interesting too, because he was another third-round pick, just like Dorian Williams. Is there a shot that he could win this position? I know we just talked about it's either going to be Dodson, Klein, or Dorian, but let's not forget about Terrell Bernard. So what do we think about this guy?
I mean, theoretically, he has a shot at this just as much as Dorian Williams, as Dodson. Everyone has a shot at it. I don't necessarily think he will, but you could make a case for him.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that we're, going into a second year and we still don't know anything about him, what he can do at this level, or, if he can start, where he's going to start, all this stuff we don't know anything about him. Could he be starter? Maybe, but realistically, he could just be another special teams player again this year.
Or maybe he just ends up being Milano's backup.
Or he could be a trade candidate. I mean, who knows with him right now? We have all this depth, and they don't use him.
Now, one other guy that we should definitely mention is Balin Spector. And I was going to ask you guys this about Terrell Bernard, so I'll just kind of lump these two together here. I've been saying this for months that maybe the Bills could play a little bit more positionless football. And now that we think that they're going to be more aggressive with McDermott calling the shots, could we see more of a 4-3? And if we do, could that be Terrell Bernard's role or Dorian Williams or maybe even Balin Spector when they need a third linebacker out there where, last year Leslie Frazier was very hard-headed by saying, no, we're going to stick to our nickel defense, bend but don't break. Maybe McDermott wants to mix things up and he takes Taron Johnson off the field and he says, hey, Dorian Williams, this plays for you. Go out there. Or, hey, Balin Spector, we need you. Go out for a series. Something like that. And something else that we could get into is Taylor Rapp playing some dime. But specifically this 4-3 coverage. Do you guys see that being in the cards here for the Bills defense this year?
I definitely think that's a possibility, especially because otherwise you wouldn't have brought in Taylor Rapp. You wouldn't have let Edmunds walk. You wouldn't have emphasized the open competition. I think that maybe they are trying to play a bit more situational or positionless in their defensive assignments, because before everyone knew, okay, base nickel, Tremaine Edmunds is there, Milano's there. Milano's more of a blitzer than Edmunds. It was a bit more predictable. Now you bring in Taylor Rapp, who can line up at safety, slot, dime, linebacker, all over the place. You can bring in Dorian Williams and have him and Milano on the field at the same time, both really effective blitzers. And you don't know who's going to do what. We'll see.
Bryce, what do you think?
I think it is going to be a lot of, positionless football with the way, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have drafted, brought in all these free agents. I mean, the way Taylor Rapp can play on this defense, nickel, corner, safety, linebacker, played some D-line, some D-line with the Rams. So, we're going to change from years past with Leslie Frazier, where it's like Zach said, you know where all these players are going to line up. You know what's going to happen on this defense. This year might not be so much of that. Teams won't be able to game plan as much, week to week.
So I'm going to throw out a scenario. Going back to the 21 season, when it was essentially a hurricane, and the Bills still played nickel defense, even though Mac Jones was not throwing at all. The Patriots ran 3 times. So do you think if the Bills run into that situation this year, is that the perfect time to put a third linebacker out there? Do you think we'll finally see that this year?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I would love to see a linebacker room with Bernard, Dorian, and Milano all on field at the same time, especially in situations where, Kevin, you just said we get bad weather and teams are just running the ball constantly. I think that would be a perfect time to have those 3 on field at once.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets into that situation where, you're facing a team like New England and, they can only really be effective running the ball because it's bad weather and McCorkle Jones isn't that good a passer. Yeah, I think obviously you'd want to try to incorporate some 4-3, but whether or not it's those 3 specifically is the other question, because do you want Bernard as the third linebacker? Do you want AJ Klein? Do you want it to be like Dodson, Dorian, and Milano? You can still do that, but I think they will do 4-3 if they feel it's necessary. But for the most part, you're still going to stick with what you're strongest at, and that's the nickel, because Teron Johnson plays like a linebacker. He plays bigger than his size. And that's why he's one of the best slot corners in the league, and that's why he got paid the big bucks from McBean, and that's why everyone loves him here. Still probably better than our current linebacker 3 anyways, so that's why they're going to keep going with the nickel.
One last thing to encapsulate all this here. Do you guys think that if the Bills don't do what we're talking about and they don't use that third linebacker and they have 2 third-round linebackers on the bench, not starting at middle linebacker, do you think that'll raise some concerns? And do you think we're going to hear about that from the fans and just the media in general? Do you think that'll be a talking point, that why did we draft 2 linebackers in the 3rd round 2 years in a row and they're both just sitting on the bench? So if neither of those guys get playing time this year, will that raise some concern for you?
It won't raise concern for me. It will probably be a talking point among the fan base. But I think here's the difference. They're 3rd round picks. It's the difference between a day 2 and day 3 pick not necessarily seeing playing time in the first couple years, and a 1st round pick sitting on the bench for his first 2 years. It's a 3rd round pick. It's draft status doesn't mean too much besides the financial side after they're drafted. It really doesn't. Nothing's guaranteed after you're drafted.
Yeah, Bryce, what do you think?
Yeah, I gotta agree with Zach here. I'm not going to be too concerned if Dorian doesn't get too much playing time. Same with Bernard, but I feel like Dorian's going to see the field a little bit more than Bernard did last year, just because he can play mid linebacker, he can play outside, be that 3rd linebacker if you want, or even maybe switch out for Milano once in a while. Just give him a breather. I mean, there's so many options you can do with Dorian, but I think you're going to see him on the field quite a bit this year, no matter what.
And, I'm wondering if maybe they use Dorian Williams for the Von Miller role. And I should be careful with how they say that because there's no way you replace Von Miller. And they have Leonard Floyd now. But I wonder if Von does start on the PUP list, if they try to ease Dorian Williams' way into the NFL by saying, hey, we need some more athleticism on the field. We need more of a pass rush. Maybe that's how we can get Dorian Williams on the field. Maybe we don't want to give him all the duties of being the middle linebacker, because let's not forget, unless they're changing it this year, the middle linebacker always calls the shots. He always calls the plays and relays the messages on the field on McDermott's defense. So that might be too much pressure to put on Dorian Williams right off the bat, where maybe, again, if it's not a 4-3 look, maybe they just design different packages where they can put Dorian Williams on the field to get more of a pass rush when Von is out.
I think they could. They could do that. Like I said, he was he was an effective blitzer in college. So there's no reason to think he couldn't step into that role almost immediately this year as a rookie. And also, considering in the past, I think like I also mentioned a little earlier, Milano was the main blitzing linebacker. So I think what could happen is, because Milano is such a good coverage linebacker, they could switch it up and say, okay, Dorian, you blitz, Milano will go back into coverage. But as for positionally, and like you said, I think terming it the Von Miller role, I think technically Leonard Floyd's taking over that role in the interim. Like, he plays the position, he does the same thing. But yeah, I see what you're getting at, where Dorian Williams could be sort of a blitz specialist at linebacker to start, and then ease his way into more of the Mike role. I think that could happen. I mean, they could even, again, if the middle linebacker competition is truly wide open, then they could rotate. So they could have Dotson in like early downs, then they alternate between other guys. Like, I think there's plenty of ways they could approach this.
All right. Well, do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up here? Any final thoughts about today's show? Excuse me. Today's show, or what we have coming up this week at Buffalo Fanatics?
I'm good on my end. I think we talked about all this pretty good, covered all the points.
Yeah, I'm all set here.
Zach? So what do we have on tap this week here at Buffalo Fanatics?
Well, I know Bryce is going to have his usual pieces. I think Kevin's going to have another edition of his ranking. Yeston will be back with another Buffalo Bulletin on Wednesday or midweek. I am getting very much closer to finishing the piece I've been working on the last couple weeks. Just gotta cross the I's, dot the T's, all that.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this afternoon show. Once again, we stream live during the afternoon. And once again, we want to apologize for the lagginess that we've been dealing with here. Going to try to get to the bottom of it, but it seems like it's, an ongoing problem. So not exactly sure what the answer is, but, we'll keep working on it. But regardless, we're going to go back and chop this up and put some timestamps on, and then you guys will be able to go back and watch any part that you want. I know we didn't have maybe the biggest turnout today. it was kind of, last minute. And again, there's been an issue with our streaming network with Facebook, so we couldn't go live on Facebook, so we lost some of our viewers from that. But again, it'll be up on YouTube right when we're done here. So either way, appreciate you guys for tuning in today, and keep it locked and loaded here on Buffalo Fanatics. We'll be back next Sunday on our normal scheduled time. It'll be July 16th once again. Today was Dick Duran Day. It'll be 716 next Sunday. We'll be back 9 o'clock right here on the BF Writers Club on Buffalo Fanatics, if I can say that, words. But all right, that's it for us. Go Bills.
Go Bills, baby.